What is a myth you are tired of hearing people think is true? The other big one that springs to mind is the whole if you put a frog in cold water and very slowly raise the heat, the frog will let itself be boiled a live thing, a reference that gets used a homily in any discussion about slow change. Yes, in 1869 renowned German psychologist Friedrich Goltz did put a frog in a pot of water and slowly bring it to a boil, and the frog did not jump out. 1. He was trying to determine if the frog had a soul. 2. And I cannot stress this part enough, he took the frog's brain out first. Yeah. It was a dead frog. Kind of a major factor that gets lost in the pop culture version. He did the experiment again with a live frog, and brace yourself for a shocking twist, when the water got hot enough the frog jumped out. How would putting a dead frog in slowly warming water determine if it had a soul? What else won't jump out of boiling water? A rock. Does a rock have a soul? No. So if a frog does not jump out of boiling water, it must be made of rocks and therefore does not have a soul. Who are you, who are so wise in the ways of science? This one is especially stupid because we've always known about seasonal migration. Animals will go someplace else when summer is too hot for their liking. Of course they'll jump out of a boiling pot of water. Aha! But does it jump to the north? No, it takes a jump to the left. And then a step to the right. Honestly, I thought they migrated more for food than comfort. You thought correctly. There are no animals, only food stores with constantly replenished stocks. Dogs see in black and white. They see in like bluish-yellowish. There was a great short I saw of somebody not knowing why his dog couldn't find the red, I think, toy in the grass. He put on dog filler glasses and saw it disappeared in the green grass. LOL. That's where I saw it, too. Me and my dog are just the same. Red and even orange golf balls have me feeling blind sometimes. I'm not even colorblind, and seeing red balls in the rough or even the fairway is so tough for me. I'm probably on the far end of being pretty badly colorblind, and I always use this as an example of what being colorblind is like. They're so obviously red to me and I can see that clearly. But yeah, once they're in grass I basically have to trip over them to find them, something to do with the two colors once they're together. Ancient healing techniques are better than modern medicine. As an archaeologist, this one makes me seethe. Ancient healing techniques that actually worked became modern medicine. Do you know what they call alternative medicine that works? Medicine. Homeopathic medicine just means it failed the evidence test, otherwise, it would just be normal medicine. Homeopathic medicine is a special kind of stupid though. It's not a word for simply any natural remedy. It's not just oh this worked in ancient times. It's a deliberate con suggesting that diluting the active ingredient thousands of times in water makes it thousands of times stronger and more effective. You've got ghosts in your blood. Let's drill a hole in your skull to let them out. What's this nonsense about washing your hands before delivering a baby? I just did one 5 minutes ago, let's do this. You ever hear about the health benefits of bloodletting? I pulled some leeches out of the swamp today. Yup. Totally better. Leeches, if I recall right, are still used for some medical stuff. That said, they will not have been just removed from the swamp. Yup. Leeches are still used today, essentially for the same reason, but with scientific backing. More of a misunderstanding than a myth, but a shocking number of people think that most people died around age 35 until the late 19th century or so. A misunderstanding of mean and average. Throughout most of history, if you survived childbirth/early age, basically if you made it to puberty, you were gonna live to be fairly old, 60 plus in most cases. The fact that birth, infancy, and early childhood was so hard to survive just pulled the average number down. While that was a big factor, there were still a lot of other issues bringing down expected lifespan at any age, even if not nearly as much as you'd think just looking at life expectancy from birth. Yeah, this is something both sides are overlooking. If you pick a random ancient person's name and read about them, there's a good chance they lived to 65, and a good chance they died at 30, from a bar fight or infection or fever or some other issue, but stats show that their lifespan, while shorter, was not as bleak as people think. People really cannot have any nuance between everyone lived just like today or better or everyone lived to 30 and died from sudden death syndrome. A lot of diseases were less common, obesity-related, and a lot were more common, malnutrition or parasite-related, but also parts of the world still struggle similarly, like some parasites are still very common, and these days they usually carry more diseases than back then either from the warming world, or just from international travel. Our ability to treat things is higher, but also we are more global and more diseases have wider ranges. Their ability to treat injury was decreased, but their risk factors were all shuffled. Is driving in a car or controlling a mule more dangerous? Generally they lived shorter lives than we do, but like, 60 is shorter. We've added a good 15 years since then, but we haven't doubled our lifespan or anything crazy outside of extraordinary circumstances. There's also still room to improve in the future, since industry also adds risk factors, like the plastic in our blood or the ridiculous, actually physically impossible in ancient times, amount of sugar hidden in everything. At one point literal kings would conserve sugar. It's crazy to think the diabetes rate would be as high as it is today, for example. Nobody wants to think about it. Past current day is scientific utopia or distant past is noble savage utopia. Really ruins a book when someone is like, I would have been middle-aged at that time. No, you wouldn't. Just illness, famine and lack of medical care meant kids died easily. Then war meant young men died easily. And lack of medicine meant women giving birth died easily. That meant by 30 lots of people had already died. But those surviving could often live to 80 plus. While people did live to 80, it was far more common to die in your 60s. Specifically, it was the very high infant death rate, I think something like only 50% of people reached the age of 5, that skewed the overall lifespan. I agree. I see my use of the word often was incorrect. When I was typing I was thinking along the lines of it occurred more than people think, not it was the norm to live to 80 if you got past 30. Yes, the infant mortality rate is the biggest part. But the other factors also mean when people remove the infant mortality rate the average still makes it look like everyone died young still. That's why I mentioned all the different factors that skew the results and make people think living until 80 didn't happen. Just be yourself, it will all work out. Some of you are fucked up. Change. OMG, I have met people who were super problematic and would double down on how the right people would accept them, or better yet, that they somehow knew some kind of secret and that is why everyone hates them, or it was all okay because they don't really like people anyway. Stop with the excuses because you're too lazy to contribute and or be reasonably well-mannered most of the time. Change. It's okay to admit you kinda suck, lol. It's better than sucking forever. There's a young woman I know who is a nice enough person I guess, but somehow has convinced herself that she has pretty much no flaws, and what flaws she does have people must accept, because that's just how her brain works and that's that. Meanwhile, she's an immature gossip for whom trauma dumping is her only form of communication. No matter how large or small the group, the topic of discussion, or situation, she'll loudly hijack the conversation when she enters the room and start dumping. She won't allow anyone to speak once she's started, and if someone does manage to get a word in, she immediately steers the conversation back to her trauma. The only way the groups manage to have other conversations is by starting a quiet side convo. People will tune her out and join any side conversation they can until she's talking to herself. After a minute she realizes no one is listening to her and she'll shut up. I don't want to know what she's like one-on-one. There's another woman in the group who's similar, a little older, but she tries to notice when she's steamrolling people and reels it in. That evolving necessarily means improving. Yes. As Thomas Kuhn emphasized, in biological and scientific evolution/development, the direction of change is away from something that is not working well. It does not necessarily move towards something that is intrinsically better. The new thing lacks a particular fatal flaw, but it may have many of its own flaws. This is a very simplistic framing of both evolution and of Kuhn, but it's a useful heuristic. Also, evolution doesn't necessarily find the best adaptation, just one that works well enough. Also, evolution is only affected by things that affect your ability to survive long enough to have children and raise them. It's not affected by, for example, how good you are at running a business. Or your IQ score. That your blood is blue before it's oxygenated. I believed this for way too long just because of color coding in scientific art. I just never really thought about it closely until I mentioned it offhandedly in a conversation and got, rightfully, absolutely roasted by my mates. The best line being my then-boyfriend gently asking, "So, why isn't blood purple when it comes out from being stabbed or injured?" OMG, me too bad. I felt so embarrassed, but it was the fault of biology books. I drew blood for a decade and worked 8 years as a nurse. This is actually sort of true. It's not like navy blue, but it has a dark purplish tinge when it's not oxygenated, drawn from veins into a vacuole container, and it is significantly brighter and more red when drawn from arteries. Veins are blood pre-oxygenation, arteries are blood post-oxygenation. What? It's either darker red or bright red. There's no dark purple blood. It's definitely purple appearing to me. As evidenced by my patients saying, "Why is my blood purple looking?" I must be really sick, and then me having to explain that is the color that blood is coming out of veins. Also, cyanosis, which literally means blue condition, occurs most commonly when patients are experiencing hypoxemia or low blood oxygen levels, so saying deoxygenated blood or low levels of oxygen in blood doesn't make blood appear blue/purple is just not true. Some blood is definitely bluer than other blood. I get that it's a medical subtlety though, and it's not blue in the same sense that the sky is blue, but deoxygenated blood is relatively bluer than oxygenated blood. The whole shaving makes it grow thicker. It's not true, I've tried, I still have a shitty stubble. I think this got started because guys usually start shaving in the middle of puberty. It probably seemed like more hair would grow in its place every time they shave, but that's just because it's the beard growing era. I like that idea that it's a wives' tale to get teenagers to shave their awful mustaches. Too bad we can't get them to shave off the stupid broccoli haircuts. Give it 5 to 10 years. Emo hair will be all the rage again. No, Victorian women did not have ribs removed to look thinner. We have no documented sources of this actually happening beyond a colleague of mine heard from a friend that they're doing it in foreign country type publications. Surgery was extremely risky prior to the 20th century, and there's almost no way anyone would risk their lives for something like that, or even be able to find a doctor who'd be willing to do so. Also, extreme tight lacing, the kind that actually changes your body shape, was very rare, which is why it was commented on and used as advertising. Women who tight laced like that were photographed because their bodies were strange. Additionally, these photographs would often be edited to make the subject's waist look even smaller. Finally, corsets were not a torture device. Corsets were basic support garments for all women, from queens and heiresses to housemaids and farm wives. Women could and did do intense physical tasks like tending animals, climbing mountains, carrying heavy loads, and crossing continents while wearing them. Saying that our ancestresses were weak or foolish because they wore them is an insult to the women who came before us. There is a scene in the first season of Bridgerton that shows the main female character, Daphne, Can't be bothered Googling, getting dressed into her tight, oppressive corset and making a point to show all the bruises from wearing such a horrible torture device. Not only were corsets not torture devices like you said, I loathe that Hollywood continues to show that corsets were worn straight into the bare skin. They weren't. Women wore long, thin chemises, robes, slips first that were the first care of their undergarments, then the corsets went over that. Couple of reasons, minor number 1, to stop rubbing and chafing, and more importantly be major number 2, because corsets were bloody expensive and hard to wash. The slip provided an extra layer of protection from sweat and dirt from the body to keep the corset clean. Please like and subscribe for more daily content.